everybody. Thank you for joining us for another edition of our Operational Reality with Rocco Million Live. I'm Rocco Million, your host. This is my group, Nonpartisans for Progress. Today, I want to talk about some different things going on in the mainstream media and, as usual, blow up the mainstream lies and scare tactics with the simple logic of our actual operational reality, MMT. And anybody can do this. This isn't complex stuff. This is simple logic. And just watching the different stuff. We gotta be able to call out the brainwashing and indoctrination that we all get. And just me going through, I'm watching, The Wizard of Oz last night. I'm watching mainstream media. I'm watching Trading Places today, another classic movie, with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. Uh, and this movie really hits home. It really exposes a fundamental truth of our society, and yet predictably, we love the movie. It's a classic, yet we completely ignore the underlying truths that it's talking about. And the basic premise of the movie Trading Places is that they could take these monopolists that own everything, have all the money, take a good man and make him bad simply by his circumstance, and take a bad person and make him good simply by circumstance. It's all about circumstances, and surprisingly, it's about our exploitative social hierarchy. It's about when people reach a higher station in life, they try to justify their station and they minimize the systemic abuses on people in lower stations, for many reasons. They don't want to be targets. They don't want to be cast out and ostracized from lose their own station in life to just, being able to sleep easy and justify their success, even though it's coming at the, failure, enforced failure of so many others. It's coming from systemic abuse of so many others. That's what people fail to realize. When somebody's privileged, that implies that then somebody else is disprivileged. They don't have that privilege. It's systemic abuse. Privilege implies systemic abuse somewhere else in the system. And that's what I see, and what it was is in the beginning of the show, they take, Winthorpe. He was the white executive. He's an overprivileged, unempathetic, but successful businessman. And he has some very harsh positions. He talks about, basically, not he ignores the systemic abuses that face the majority. He doesn't even see them. He doesn't deal with them. He's high society. And very unempathetic, like I said. And then you got Valentine. This is a black hustler type slash con man trying to survive, barely getting by. And yet he has a solid grasp on reality. And then these old monopolists, the dukes, they own everything. They come through, and with a silly little bet, they change each other's station in life. They switch places with the hustler black guy and the white executive overprivileged, unempathetic ass. And this white guy, Winthorpe, loses his job. He's arrested. He's unemployable, and he's forced to live with this prostitute. And he starts to see things in a different perspective. And then the black guy, anyway, he goes nuts though. Before Winthorpe goes nuts, he breaks into Eddie Murphy's office. He thinks that Eddie Murphy was part of the conspiracy against him to get him fired and arrested, and he thinks that Eddie Murphy was part of the systemic abuse. So he tries to plant drugs in Eddie Murphy's desk, and then calls in the Dukes. Hey, come in. Look, I got him red-handed. He got drugs in his desk. And the Dukes come running in, and they see right through it, and they say, "Come on, we know you did this." And anyway, he pulls out a gun, and he ends up running out and getting away. And then the dude, you know, Eddie Murphy's mad about this, and he flips out and he says, "Listen," he says, "I don't care. This past employer of yours deserves to be in jail." And the Duke say to him, "But wait, he's unemployed. He's poor. He can't eat." And Eddie Murphy, now the successful businessman, life turned around, says, "Well, yet he still has the money to buy these drugs. See, you can't be too easy on these people. I know this firsthand." He completely ignores all the systemic abuses that he knew firsthand, living them just a few days prior. And I know it's a movie, but it's representative of our life. Art imitates reality. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And it got me thinking about it. And really, you know, in our society, upward mobility is non existent. Really, your future is pretty much completely tied up with the future of your parents. So basically, we thought we got away from monarchies and aristocracies, and really that's exactly what we still are. People that are born into wealth and privilege, and through no work or sacrifice or anything of their own, they are given privilege and money and wealth and power, and they're shielded from the systemic abuse that the majority face. That's basically the aristocrat class, the bourgeois, the people, and these ain't really the 1%. Most of these people are, the upper middle class, the upper middle class people. It's either you're the 1% or you're the precarious, but the upper percentile of the precarious. That's what I'm talking about. These people protect the 1%, and they give air cover for the ruling class. They protect the oppressor's right to oppress. All right, people make up excuses, and this is a perfect example. I'm watching the mainstream media tonight, and on the Lawrence O'Donnell show on CNN, he's talking about, and there's some truth there. He's talking about how horrible our elections are in America, and it's a fact. We don't even get a third. We get a third of our population to even participate in our democracy, and we pat ourselves on the back. It's record. I don't care if it's a midterm or not. That's representative of a banana republic. And then you look at exit polls from official voter data, it's way off. Again, reminiscent of banana republics. We suppress the vote big time by running two right-wing candidates. There's a duopoly. If you're not a Republican or a Democrat, you are at a huge disadvantage to run for public servant in our country. And that's wrong. Public servant should be about serving the public. And if you got to, raise $1 million to get a job that pays $100,000 serving the public, there's no way. It's implied that you're going to be corrupt. You have to be. Think about this for a minute. And so we actually do have a banana republic, but he was saying democracy won with this recent blue wave in the midterms that he called it. I don't see it as a blue wave at all. Really, the Democrats should have mopped up with the Republicans because, with the overt fascism of Trump, him repealing all these environmental regulations and placing all of these judges in the federal courts and Supreme Court, he's doing huge damage, and he's an overt fascist in every way. Everyone sees it. And yet, so the blue wave should have been a tsunami, and the fact that they didn't even win, the Democrats didn't even win the Senate. I think they even lost seats. I mean, that is telling. And that's because most people are not even voting. There's no point. Their interests are not represented. We live under the same economic and police terror, whether it's Obama in the White House or it's Trump in the White House. And so why most people are like, why then vote? Why even participate at all? They don't understand that we still hold all the power collectively in America. And historically, this isn't an opinion, this is fact. If you look at the data, historically, we have always had to collectively force our public purpose. We have had to always collectively force every labor protection, every civil liberty that we have in existence. The ruling class has never just given us justice. If you look at the Great Depression, we went from the Great Depression, and then the people rose up and they forced, the New Deal, the full employment policies of the New Deal, which created a middle class that the whole world was envious of. Okay, the civil rights. You look at that. The ruling class didn't want to give this up. They didn't want to end Jim Crow. The people rose up. JFK, he didn't even want to deal with the civil rights issue. He was working with the Southern strategy. Most Democrats were Southerners, and in that era, he didn't want to, he didn't want nothing to do with civil rights. JFK, he had his little brother, Attorney General RFK, Bobby Kennedy. He had him go to the civil rights, the Freedom Riders, and tell them to stand down. They said, hell no. And hundreds of them went deep into the South. And Martin Luther King came out and joined them. And they were surrounded by hundreds of white Southerners all over the place. And Martin Luther King called the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy, and told him, we need your help. You're going to let us be lynched? They forced the hand of government. So, at that point, JFK and RFK, they had no choice but to say, yeah, send in the feds. We got to protect the civil rights of everybody. We have to make our public servants serve our public purpose. If we don't collectively enforce our rights, then we're not going to have those rights. It's that simple. And that action, those freedom fighters and that fighting and the public support, that turned, these two white guys, Bobby Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, two white, privileged, rich guys who didn't know nothing about systemic abuse and systemic racism and civil rights. It turned them around and got them on board with the civil rights movement. So, you look at the EPA, we got it with, Nixon as president. He didn't want the EPA. This was people power because we always socially own our government collectively. And no matter how tyrannical that government is, we can always collectively force it to do our bidding. And they will do our bidding long before we ever get a majority movement formed. Because once we do get a majority of support, the rulers know they're going to be deposed either way, no matter what they do. So they will always capitulate and they'll meet our demands long before we get a majority. And that's what we see historically during the New Deal, civil rights, the EPA, on and on and on. Every civil, once upon a time, children had to work 60 hours a week. Yet we don't collectively allow that today. If Trump or anybody tried to suggest we repeal child labor laws, people would flip out. We would never collectively accept that. There would be riots in the street. So there's levels of democratic struggle that each society is dealing with, and we're past that level. All right, and we know that this is why I was watching Michael Parenti the other day, and he was saying this. Why do laborers in Indonesia accept 16 cents an hour and American workers don't? Is it that we're just that superior? We just have that much more knowledge and wisdom than workers in Indonesia? No. The difference is the level of democratic struggle our society has in America versus Indonesia. Okay. So think about that. And the fact of the matter is, these people, they want you to ignore the reality. They want you to ignore the brutality of our reality. All right. And this is simple logic, guys. Anybody can destroy the mainstream lies and scare tactics with simple logic and common sense. If you have any questions, put them down. If you don't agree with me somewhere, put them down, because I'm going to talk about a bunch of really controversial topics here in a minute. But basically, what people need to understand is We have a socially owned government, and we have a social contract called the Constitution. This contract guarantees us a socially owned government for, of, and by the people. Right? That socially owned government for the general welfare and common defense to ensure domestic tranquility. That's the public purpose. So our Constitution guarantees us a socially owned government for the public purpose. Right? And then it's letting individuals make what they can from the balanced economy that creates. Our socially owned government is never supposed to work for the individual and for society to make do with the scraps. That's called fascism. When government is controlled by one people, in essence, that's what fascism is. It's a big part of it is squashing labor and empowering corporate power. So, you know, and what we have to understand is this social document, Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 5, the coinage clause, it mandates that Congress and only Congress can mint and tax to provide for our general welfare and common defense, to ensure for that domestic tranquility that the preamble of the Constitution talks about. So Article 1, Section 8 makes it clear our federal government is the currency issuer. As such, it never needs income or revenue to spend and operate. All federal spending is brand new dollars created by congressional decree from thin air, by congressional law from thin air. That's how all federal spending takes place. Federal revenue is destroyed upon receipt. All right, it's deleted upon receipt. It only exists as accounting identity after that in a ledger somewhere. The government doesn't use revenue at the federal level to spend ever. It's the currency issuer. You can't even collect a tax until the currency issuer first spends dollars into existence. So you don't have to be a PhD to understand this stuff. You just need to use simple logic and think about it in an unbiased way and willing to say, wow, the way we've been taught is wrong. And this is simple logic that proves it. 2 plus 2 can't equal 3. Taxes cannot fund the federal government. You can't even collect a tax until government first spends dollars into existence. Until the currency issuing government first spends dollars into existence, you can't even sell a bond. So it's completely illogical to ever think that taxes and bond sale revenue somehow fund our federal government. Okay, it's impossible. It's simple logic. The federal spending funds the taxpayers who then pay tax or buy bonds or whatever. It can never be vice versa at the federal level. You don't believe me? Try to start a game of Monopoly by collecting rent. It's impossible. The money always has to be issued first before you can take back rent or tax or sell bonds. The currency issuer has to issue the currency into the economy. So taxes and bond sales can never fund our federal government. We all have to understand this. This is one of the hugest ways the ruling class keep even good people, well-meaning people on the hamster wheel of life, being counterproductive to progress. And they don't even know it. Because think about this. If you think your taxes fund other people's mistakes, it's much more likely that you're going to purpose spending. If you think your taxes need to go up to pay for a better standard of living, you will oppose public purpose spending. If you think that government needs to borrow money and burden your kids or future generations to pay for our needs today, then you're going to think it's prudent for the government to inflict artificial scarcity. These are traps. If you think that we have to cut defense or we have to tax the rich before our government as the currency issuer can do its job and spend on society, then you're not going to force our government to do its job and suspend on society until we tax the rich or cut the fence. And that's by definition artificial scarcity, because our government can always spend the dollars required to balance our economy by buying up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job for everyone who wants one. True full employment. We could balance our economy. Government has to target its budget deficit to true full employment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program. And then people wouldn't be dependent on private credit to live. And also this would set the minimum wage to the living wage without even a mandate to the private sector. Because if the private sector doesn't beat the federally guaranteed living wage and working conditions, then they simply can't attract a labor workforce to leave the federal job guarantee. So in essence, the federal job guarantee, it's revolutionary in so many ways. It forces capital to change their whole business model to truly value labor, or they can't attract a labor workforce away from the federal job guarantee to begin with. It also ends for profit imperialism by ending the military's employer of last resort status. So no longer would our military have all this leverage to go around and recruit all these insecure workers who have no other option for stable career opportunities other than going into the military and killing people. All right. So without all that leverage, now the military would never be able to keep the bodies it needs to inflict this global empire, this global war of empire. And without all the people, so they would have to be forced to abandon their goals of empire and truly defend our rights against all enemies, foreign and domestic, from rogue nations to our domestic capitalist class. That would be the only way that the military would be able to make enough people feel patriotic enough to leave the federal job guarantee and go into the military and serve for our common defense. So, the federal job guarantee also restores democracy. It kills. This is important. This is real important. So I'm going to say this again. All right. And this is real important. So I'm going to say this again. But the federal job guarantee, it also kills gerrymandering. It restores democracy by giving people extreme mobility. It empowers LGBT and people of color, again, by giving everybody extreme mobility. If your local or state government doesn't serve the public purpose, if they don't work to keep their citizens happy, people could simply get up and go to another town that does, knowing that they have a federally guaranteed job program waiting for them wherever they go. And what that would do to the substandard city, they would then lose their ability to function because they need their tax base. Local governments and state governments, they can't make their own dollars. Only the federal government can. So local and state governments are dependent on their tax base and tax revenue to spend and operate. So if they don't keep their people happy, people can simply get up and go to another community that does. In the substandard city, they lose their ability to operate. So in essence, it would force local governments to work for their citizens, keeping them happy, or they lose their tax base and their ability to operate. So it restores democracy. It makes gerrymandering irrelevant. It makes the minimum wage the living wage. We already covered that. It's also an economic stabilizer. So it runs counter-cyclical to the natural ebbs and flows of the business cycle. When the business cycle goes on a downturn and businesses start laying people off, those people start losing their incomes. And so less production usually will get bought. And so more idle production means that business lays off even more people. And more people lose their income, less production. It's a downward spiral that can only be stopped by government intervention as the currency issuer. So to stop that downward spiral, when the business government uses economic stabilizers. All right, but these are half measures right now that we use, like food stamps, unemployment insurance, welfare. It's designed to give people a minimum amount of money to keep spending and buying production and to minimize the worst of recessionary pressures. But they're half measures and they're really sadistic. We could do far better with the federally guaranteed living wage job program as a real economic stabilizer. As people lose their jobs in the business sector, forget food stamps. They get a guaranteed living wage job that hones their skills, keeps them a marketable asset to get back into the private sector, into better paying work. And it gives them that income that they could keep spending and buying production. So it really shortens a recession and it really protects everybody at the bottom from the worst of a recession. So it kicks the economy right back in. And as the economy goes down, the federal job guarantee will expand. It runs counter cyclical. So when the economy starts to recover, people are buying production. Uh, Businesses need more people to keep up with the demand for production. So they start to hire people away from the federal job guarantee again. So the job guarantee will naturally contract as the economy gets better. And then when the economy starts to get bad again, the federal job guarantee will automatically increase. And this doesn't require politicians or anything else. They set the program in motion and you set the federal budget to true full employment. And it'll be counter cyclical to the natural ebbs and flows of business. This is how we balance our economy in a green, sustainable way that allows us to maximize our productive capacity, rebuilding our communities across America in green and sustainable ways, without raising taxes, without making cuts. You know, public debt for society and a higher standard of living is the entire point of government and dollars, deficit spending to begin with. So think about this. Another big lie that they tell us, the national debt is somehow a burden on future generations. Public debt is somehow bad. They make us think that public debt is somehow our debt. But in reality, that's not true. Public debt is our asset. Those are our dollars in existence. We're free to earn those dollars and do whatever we want. Those are our assets, our tax credits in existence. Our debt is personal debt. That's what we owe for credit cards and student loan debt and healthcare debt and you name it, landlord debt and this and that. That's, so anyway, I forget where I was at. This is the problem. See, I don't feel good. I do this stuff because we have to do it. Regular people, if we have to depend on the experts or the politicians or the top to force people to deal with our reality, our nobody will deal with our reality. It's up to us to be the change we want to see. So we all have to stand up and speak out. We all have to learn our actual operational reality, MMT, from the greats, like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Dr. Fidel Kaboob, Ellis Winningham, Dr. Stephen Hill, follow people like Steve Grumbine. This dude, he has tons of passion and knowledge. Real progressives is where I learned everything I know. And I love Real Progressives. They'll forever be our sister group here at Nonpartisans for Progressives, for Progress. So go there, follow Real Progressives, follow the Modern Money Network, follow Deficit Owls, and look up people like Howard Zinn, A People's History of the United States. Learn our true history. Our operational reality is simple logic and historical data. MMT describes our operational reality in a non-biased way, a non-partisan, non-ideological way. And if you're concerned with progress for progress sake, then you're going to be gravitating toward MMT and operational reality. Because through MMT, we have the ability to unite all sides across the political spectrum for our public purpose mandated I was talking to a Republican tonight. Who could disagree with, our Constitution, opportunity for all, the public purpose? Republicans, everyone agrees with this, really. So I talked to him, and at first I lost my cool. He said that I was a bleeding heart liberal. I called him names. No communication took place. And then a day went by. I looked at it again in my previous comment. I was like, why did I lose my temper? I should have just talked. So I commented again, and I was talking to him like it was me 20 years ago. And I used to be a Republican. I was in the Navy. I even voted for George W. Bush twice. I used the same talking points he did. He was a conservative, and he didn't understand systemic abuse. And so I told him, we just want opportunity for all. Don't you agree with that? And he said, yeah. And you need to understand America has opportunity for all. And that's what my grandfather fought a war for. And I said, great. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because, that means we're in agreement. Now, let me talk to you about systemic abuse, of involuntary unemployment, because 5% of the working class is forced to be unemployed and poor, regardless of their skills, regardless of, responsibility. They are forced to be unemployed as our government targets 5% of our 5% unemployment. Now, even though we have work all over America, our communities are literally crumbling, in need of work that's essential for the general welfare and common defense to ensure domestic tranquility. We need work all over, and our government is forcing millions to be unemployed and poor. That's untapped productive capacity. That's artificial scarcity that kills more than guns and drugs combined. And yet nobody even blinks an eye. This is status quo. Our government can easily spend the dollars required to buy up all unemployment and maximize that untapped productive capacity, rebuilding our crumbling communities in green, sustainable ways without raising taxes or making cuts. Because as a currency issuer, our government can never run out of dollars. Dollars are simply laws to satisfy tax. You can't run out of laws, so you can't run out of dollars. It's the stuff that dollars buy that limit us. So the only thing that matters is that we have the real resources available to meet the demand for any program. If that's the case, then we can always, the government, the federal government as the currency issuer, can always afford that program without raising taxes or making cuts, and it'll be non-inflationary spending every single time. It's all about matching supply and demand.
Tuesdays is proudly supported by Modern Money Lab, an organization founded by economists Stephen Hale and Phil Lawn and activist Gabby Bond. Modern Money Lab and Torrens University are running online graduate courses in MMT and ecological economics from September this year. You don't have to have a conventional economics degree to apply, and if you're interested, Stephen and Gabby will be happy to answer all of your questions.
Hi, my name's Gabrielle Bond and I'm here with my friend Stephen Hale. You might remember us from our show on Kerberos Media, Modern Money Donuts.
We're proud sponsors of Kerberos Media. We'd like to tell you about our global online courses in modern monetary theory and ecological economics. They start this September. They're unique as far as I can tell. I don't think there's anything like them anywhere in the world.
If you want to find out more, you can visit our website www.modernmoneylab.org.au.
To find out about the courses, go to www.modernmoneylab.org.au.
And so the only thing that matters, the government's checks don't bounce. The government can always meet all future obligations to Social Security beneficiaries or anybody else because it makes dollars at will from thin air by congressional law. The only thing that matters is our currency issuer deficit spends enough to create and produce enough real resources so that any dollars have things to buy. That's the only thing that matters. Our government, as the currency issuer, has to deficit spend enough to invest in our productive capacity, to invest in our society, to ensure that we have enough real resources available to meet the demand for any program. Or, in other words, our government needs to make sure there's enough stuff to buy. That's it. But government can never go broke. Government's Social Security, no federal program can ever go broke. The only way you would lose Social Security is if, you know, the Congress cuts the program or they privatize it. And going back to the national debt, I got sidetracked. But public debt is our asset. All right. So the national debt is just all the dollars in existence. If the national debt was zero, we would have $0 in existence. All right. So the only way that the national debt can ever burden us, all right, is if it's too small, meaning our government, as the currency issuer, is starving our economy of dollars, targeting unemployment. And this is evidenced by tons of private credit. And that's exactly what we have today, our status quo. Our government has been starving our economy, spending, targeting unemployment, forcing millions to be unemployed and poor in a class war on labor. And those armies of unemployed people, they're always willing and they're always so desperate that they're willing to work for starvation wages under horrible conditions. This is why our wages have been stagnant from the 70s, while our productivity has been record high, while our cost of living has been record high. Our wages have been stagnant from the 70s. While their corporate profits have been record high, our wages have been stagnant from the 70s. This is class war. It's wage stagnation, wage suppression. This is why involuntary unemployment fosters starvation wage environments. And over time, what that means is you don't have enough money. The majority of people will not have disposable income to buy production and survive. And so we're all forced into private credit just to consume production and survive. What that means is we are all forced into credit cards for milk and eggs, credit for healthcare, credit for education, credit for transportation, credit for housing, you name it. And that's exactly what we have, record amounts of household debt right now. But the mainstream will tell you our economy is booming 10 years after the recovery. We're booming. Yet we're, the bottom income distribution has never recovered from the global financial crisis. In fact, we've gotten worse. Our wages have been stagnant again from the 70s, even though the corporate profits are sky high. Think about what that means. That blows up the trickle down mainstream narrative. That the top 1% are somehow the job creators. And if we just give them more money, then their wealth will trickle down onto society and create more jobs and wealth and prosperity for all. So the fantasy goes. The reality is, why on earth would rich people invest in a horrible economy where 60% of Americans don't even have a savings account, where the majority of Americans don't even make enough money to buy what they produce, evidenced by starvation wage environments and tons of private credit, record amounts of private credit. Why on earth would the rich invest in that economy? Why would they grow their business and expand production when they can't sell what they produce? Because nobody has disposable income. I don't care how many tax breaks you give them, they're not going to invest. All right, they're going to instead put their money and buy government bonds and get free interest, or they're going to put their money in the stock market. And this does nothing for the working class. Instead, this sets up toll booth operations. Credit in America doesn't create productivity. It doesn't help the working class. Instead, they don't lend you money to increase, to build a business or to expand your business and increase production. They will lend somebody money to, however, strip your business, buy it up, rogue, shareholders, strip your business and sell it off for pieces, raid the pension funds, fire the workers. And all this activity will be seen as good for the economy. It'll be seen as added economic growth. It'll be added onto our GDP. This is what they mean by inverted totalitarianism. We have the language of a democracy, but the reality of our right wing authoritative status quo. And, it ain't my opinion. The evidence is there. I want somebody to tell me where I'm wrong. We can talk about it. I'll bring you on live right now. But, the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is guns. And, this is a hot button issue, but I'm not trying to win friends. I'm trying to make people think critically and accept our reality. And the reality is, the issue of guns is a dividing issue, and it's meant to keep us artificially divided at the bottom. And both sides seem to know this, and yet the fight continues. So, let me say this for the millionth time. The link between violence, the link is not guns and violence. The link is inequality and violence. You can have a machine gun in every house. If our society fosters every person's full potential instead of, inflicting systemic abuse and radicalizing people, you're going to have a much less bloodshed. You're going to have much less mass killings. I don't care if every house has a machine gun. And, it isn't an opinion. You look at Greg Palast, he has a study, article I often share, and it shows that the link unequivocally is inequality and not guns to violence. He shows Nordic countries and Scandinavia have higher gun ownership and they have far less crime. He also shows countries like Honduras have very strict gun laws and they're not even allowed to own guns, anybody. And yet they have the highest rates of gun violence. And so, in America, we have the biggest inequality, one of the most countries, out of all the industrial countries, America is the most violent. And it's because we have the most inequality. We export neoliberalism, our for-profit way of life, all over the globe. But so anyway, guns. We could get rid of every single gun today, destroy every gun, hypothetically. But if we still allow our government to systemically radicalize so many people, to abuse so many people on a systemic level, we allow profit to be put over society. We teach our kids to put profit over society from birth. Every time they see homeless people suffering and dying of exposure, while around the corner they see empty foreclosed houses, they're being taught to put profit over society and profit over people. Every time kids see their loved ones suffering and dying of treatable, preventable illness, the only reason is because they have a lack of cash. That's what they're being taught. Put profit over people in society. Then we cut the social safety net. We decimate public education, decimate public health care. We make for-profit health care now. And now we drug all of our kids with for-profit drugs like Adderall. It's basically methamphetamine. And we criminalize nature and peaceful behavior with the drug war and for-profit justice. We legally allow cops to legally rape, rob, and kill over flowers and peaceful behavior. Talk about Sharia law. All right, this is what we do in America, and somehow we wonder why our reality, our society is devoid of humanity. Why our society is dysfunctional and violent and dog eat dog. You got to look at the reality when your government is right off the bat forcing millions to be unemployed and poor. All right. So think about this. Our government, first, it forces us to be unemployed. It forces a tax onto the private sector, on all of us. That makes unemployment. All right. Because again, the government has this contract, the Constitution. It mandates that it provide for the general welfare and common defense or domestic tranquility. So that means the government has to provide certain essential real resources like a military, like infrastructure, healthcare, and education for all, because we need smart, healthy populations to meet our needs of tomorrow and ensure domestic tranquility. Educated, sick, and uneducated and diseased populations would be completely unable to meet our needs of tomorrow, unable to ensure domestic tranquility. So that's the government's job, is to provide these essential real resources that a modern civil society requires. How does it do that? It doesn't take slaves anymore. It imposes a tax on us in the private sector. If you have a house and you're living off your garden and you live and you go hunting and you think, hey, I don't even need dollars. I could live right off the land. No, because if you live in America, your land is taxed and you have to figure out a way to come up with dollars to pay your tax. So now you're willing to sell your goods and labor to get these dollars and pay your tax and survive. That's called unemployment. That's how government got us to stop living off the land and start working for the general welfare of society. That's how we got roads, bridges, a military to stop Hitler, and so on. So it would be sadistic. So again, our government creates unemployment with taxation. It would be sadistic for our government to then leave millions of people unemployed without spending the dollars required to maximize that productive capacity with paid employment. It would be sadistic, especially when you consider that our communities are crumbling, in need of work all over, and we're forcing millions of people to be unemployed and poor. How could that be in the public interest? It would always be in the public purpose, the public interest, for the socially owned government to go ahead and spend the dollars required to buy up all unemployment with that federally guaranteed living wage job program, federally funded, locally administered, and have people start rebuilding our communities in green, sustainable ways, restore our democracy, force our elected leaders to serve us because we have collective power. You think about it, true full employment gives labor more collective bargaining power than any union in history. True full employment means that businesses have to compete for the existing labor. And so our wages rise. When the opposite, when our government targets unemployment and it keeps a buffer stock of these unemployed people waiting to work starvation wage jobs, now we're forced to, compete with each other because, business has a surplus of labor. They have all these people that government forces to be unemployed and poor and desperate. Those people are willing to work for starvation wages. So it drives our wages down. That would never be in the public purpose. That's our government working for the private profits of the 1% and subverting our democracy and our public purpose, enforcing artificial austerity on the majority of Americans. Even if you think you're doing okay, if you are a worker, if you work labor, your wages are being artificially suppressed by involuntary unemployment. All right, your standard of living is being brought down by our government systemically abusing millions and millions of people and making them radicalized. When people can't eat, civility goes out the window, and that makes society more dangerous for you and your kids. You got to think about this. We need to protect the general welfare. We all want safe society. We all want a healthy society. No, your taxes don't need to go up to fund it. All right. No, we don't have to cut defense. All right. Government can always spend as many dollars as is needed to balance our economy and meet our needs as it's mandated by our Constitution. All that's required is we collectively demand it. And, the only problem is the majority of Americans believe the mainstream lies and scare tactics that were specifically designed to keep us divided and fighting against our own public purpose. They were designed to keep us fighting amongst each other for scraps instead of demanding a seat at the kitchen table in unity, demanding a federally guaranteed living wage job program to empower labor from the predatory nature of capitalism. That's what we have to do. We can do this. There is hope. Do not be pessimistic. Do not be a nihilist. Don't be a defeatist. fight. We don't fight because we know we're going to win. We simply don't want to accept evil in our names. We simply can't leave our kids a future worse off without at least trying to fight back. We are defined by the struggle. It doesn't matter if I don't win this fight, but I'll be damned if I don't try my best. I'll be damned dead tomorrow. I'll be damned if I go down leaving my kid a future worse off without at least trying to fight back. I took an oath when I joined the Navy to uphold our Constitution and the ideas that it espouses, to uphold the principles and the rights and the civil liberties that our social contract, the Constitution, espouses. And I fully intend to do that. And I hope you do too. Because even if you didn't take that oath, it's your civic and moral duty to help us self govern ourselves, to participate in our democracy. All right. We can make rigged elections irrelevant. We can make the bribes of the rich irrelevant. We can force the ruling class to do our bidding. Historically, we have always done this well long before we ever got a majority movement going. The ruling class will always bend to our will long before we get a majority. Look at all the historical movements. Look how we got every labor protection and civil liberty in existence. We collectively forced it, and it was nowhere near a majority, because at a majority, we depose the rulers regardless. So they will always capitulate to us long before a majority. We can do this. We just got to know it's possible. We got to stop our brothers and sisters from getting on the hamster wheel of life and being counterproductive by using the same counterproductive tax to spend narratives and neoliberal narratives that are based in fantasy. We have to stop them with the simple logic of our actual operational reality, MMT. As the currency issuer, according to the Constitution, it's right there. Look at the preamble. Look at Article 1, Section 8. Understand simple logic. Trickle down can never work. Instead, we have to guarantee the income of the bottom. We have to guarantee the bottom income distribution with a federally guaranteed living wage job program. Because when you do that, they make up the largest segment of society. The more dollars they have, the more they guarantee and demand the jobs above them, because demand naturally bubbles up. It doesn't trickle down. Just think about it. If you give people at the bottom money, we have needs today. I have tons of needs that are unmet. I will spend 100% of what you give me. 60% of Americans don't even have a savings. We will spend what we get. And that means that the people, the skilled and educated on top of us, they will always have work meeting our needs. That's how you balance an economy. Demand naturally bubbles up. You could give the rich all the money in the world. They're not going to invest in an economy where we have record amounts of private household debt because nobody has disposable income to spend. So we all have to be forced into credit to live, to buy production. No rich people will invest in that. No matter how much money you give them, they're not going to expand their business and increase production if they can't sell that production. It's that simple, folks. Understand this, start preaching it, each one teach one, learn our operational reality. Thank you guys. Any questions before I go? Oh yeah, but about the gun thing real quick, let me wrap up. So I'm not really, you can destroy all guns if you don't stop our government from inflicting systemic abuse, radicalizing people to kill in the first place. Radicalized people will simply use a different tool to kill. All right. And so this problem would be no better if we had mass bombings than if we had mass shootings. You're just as dead, even more damaged, maybe. So, that's a superficial, feel-good way to deal with this problem. It doesn't deal with the root issue of violence and how you deal. So, but I would actually meet them halfway, and I would be okay with an assault rifle ban, but only if it's tied to a federally guaranteed living wage job program, because that's the only way to destroy so much of the systemic abuse that radicalizes these people to begin with. Think about this. If you don't have no hope for a better tomorrow, if you are forced to, you do everything right, you try to get a good education, you come from shit, you try to get a good education with no public education, no, you're sickly and diseased with no public health care. You can't get a living wage job. You're forced to work starvation wages. Okay, you're gonna have to survive on the black market. All right, when you can't eat and you're desperate like that, your civility goes out the window and society becomes more dysfunctional and violent for everybody. So you have to stop that, and like I said, guns have been with us from the beginning. Only now are we seeing the level of, senseless mass murder, because it's the end stage of capitalism. And now we put profit over people more than any time in our existence. We've completely destroyed the social safety net. We starve our economy, forcing millions to be unemployed. We force millions to work, millions more to work starvation wage jobs with no upward mobility, forcing millions to be on the alternative economy. Then we inflict for profit justice. We criminalize nature and peaceful behavior. So the only way that people could even deal with the horrible neoliberal reality is by getting high and anesthetizing ourselves. And then they criminalize that because they want us doing their drugs. It's not the government doesn't want you to do drugs. It just doesn't want you to do, it wants you to do their drugs, the for-profit drugs. They make legal synthetic versions for every illegal drug we have, just about. And these legal synthetics on the for-profit healthcare side, they're always more toxic and addictive than a natural illegal drug. Look at Adderall; it's like methamphetamine, horrible. We give it the, you know, illegal cocoa leaves would be much safer than them Adderall. Cocoa paste would be much safer than them Adderall. You look at Oxycontin and fentanyl compared to poppy paste. All right, it's been around thousands of years. Humankind had, some people think we've evolved because poppy, and its pain relieving qualities and its ability to make people think outside the box. And then all of a sudden our for-profit healthcare gets a hold of it, synthesizes it, and makes fentanyl and oxy, which are thousands of times stronger than the actual poppy, the opium, and more addictive and toxic. And then they get everyone addicted on it, and then, you let cops rape, rob, and kill people over this stuff. And that ain't the worst of it, because it ain't the people in the hood that are bringing these drugs in from overseas. Our CIA is actively involved in right-wing proxy wars all over the nation, all over the world, and these proxy wars, like right now in Afghanistan, we now empowered the Karzai government and his brother, the warlords, and we empowered the heroin traffickers. And under our command, Afghanistan has quadrupled their heroin production. And corresponding with that increase in heroin production is the opioid crisis in America. This is no coincidence. Our CIA went in and empowered the heroin traffickers. We give them logistical support. Nobody moves inside Afghanistan without the U.S. knowing about it. We give the heroin traffickers logistical support. We protect their farms. And then we inflict more draconian drug laws domestically. All right. And this isn't a one-off thing, but we inflict more draconian drug laws domestically. And now disabled veteran like me, I've even had multiple spinal surgeries, and I still can't get the medications I need. My doctor tells me straight out, they feel for me. They know I need it, but they're simply too afraid of the DEA. They're too afraid of going to jail. So they cannot write me the life-saving medications that I need. And so I am forced to play doctor without any government regs or any medical oversight on the black market. And guess what that does? That doesn't help the individual or society. Now we have this huge opioid overdose epidemic. All right. And we're arresting people left and right. They become fodder for a for-profit justice system, fodder for for-profit prisons, fodder for policing for profit with civil asset forfeiture laws and this and that. Think about civil asset forfeiture. They, under the guise of the drug war, again, criminalizing nature and peaceful behavior, we go in and we allow our police to legally take your house if they want, legally take your bank account, seize it, take your car, any assets. They don't even got to charge you with a crime. With the civil asset forfeiture laws, they're legally allowed to take your stuff without even charging you. They charge your stuff. It's up to you to prove your stuff wasn't in a conspiracy. All they got to do is suspect you. All right. Last year, police stole more stuff using civil asset forfeiture than all crime and criminals combined. Look it up. It's a fact. In you when you hear that. Don't get mad at me, for describing the brutality of our reality. Getting mad at the brutality of our reality. The words I'm saying is not more offensive than the reality they describe. But all right, guys, thank you all for watching. I'm going to take off. Absolutely. Each one teach one, learn MMT. Real progressives, join the revolution. We are the revolution. We are the media. Again, look up people like Dr. Stephanie Kelton. Look up people like Howard Zinn. Look up people like Stephen Hale, Fidel Kaboob, Ellis Winningham, Steve Grumbine. Again, read a people's history. Check out Michael Hudson's book. Many books actually, but the Killing the Host, or J is for Junk Economics specifically. These are great works, really, to make you understand the big picture. All right, please check this stuff out. Force others to deal with our reality. Take a position based in that reality, and when they take an inhumane position, that's when we criticize them. We ostracize them until they rectify their socially offensive position. But as long as they're living in a delusion, good people, as long as they're not forced to even deal with the fact that we force millions to be unemployed, when every time you hear somebody talking about lazy unemployed people or people on welfare, you could tell them they're not mooches. They're not leeching off the government. They're actually victims of class war. In actuality, involuntary unemployment. These people want to work. Our government forces us to work for dollars instead of living off the land, and then forces them to be unemployed by not spending the dollars needed to maximize their productive capacity with paid employment. It's sadistic. It's artificial scarcity, untapped productive capacity. We can always force the government to buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program. Collectively, we could force it.